T-minus 196 hours till induction. This is the Parenting Podcast. I am Matthew, a soon-to-be parent. Mary, my soon-to-be parent friend, colleague, partner, spouse, adore, love of my life, I'm very tired, is currently napping. Food is cooking. A meal train is set up. We are 8 days away. I'm about to spend my last weekend child-free, and I'm here talking with two of my favorite parents. They're not my parents. They are parenting me in my journey into parenthood, though we are all of Gen X. But together, the three of us are the once and future parents. Welcome to this episode. Soon, your host will shut up and stop rambling, I promise, and turn it over to the two of you. Ms. Mandy, Ms. Kaplan, you who
if
are...
you're nasty.
If you're nasty.
Sorry.
L.A. cabaret lady.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself.
Well, hello there. I am Mandy Kaplan, host of the Make Me a Nerd podcast and many other ventures, and a proud mom to an incredible 15-year-old son, Casey.
That's pretty wonderful.
Who might come up in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Just might. You don't know. Mr. Pete Wright.
I'm Pete Wright. I am host of Headstone with Pete Wright. You should check it out. It's a show about human legacy and the things we leave behind. And also parent to a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old, Sophia and Nicholas.
I called my kid
come.
incredible, and you did not. You just said their ages. So
They don't need the words. They just demonstrate.
Oh, there you go. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Two different policies here on affirmation for kids that we'll discuss at some point with all the psychological background we have, which is none. I will also point out that, Pete, I do need to say your podcast sounds great, and all of Pete's podcasts are great, and they are legion, to be clear. But for a minute, I got really excited that you were doing a podcast about headstones and graveyards and tombstones and that kind of thing. And while I have not smoked a clove or worn patchouli in probably 2 decades, I am still a goth at heart. I had many goth friends. I dated many goth people when I was younger. And the amount of listeners I think I could get you for a tombstones podcast about headstones. Well, another legacy.
It should have.
It's there for the taking.
I totally understand, and I regret that now. But it really should have been called MacGuffin with Pete Wright. That's really what it should have been called.
Okay.
It's not about headstones at all.
I can get that. Well, let's talk about this week in parenting. I have some news. We're getting pretty close. As I said, we are 8 days and now 3 hours and 57 minutes. Up to that, although actually I made up the 57 and all of you can tell how many minutes we've been speaking for. But, it's parent math. It's okay. But Pete and Mandy, any stories from the parenting trenches for us?
Mandy?
I don't think so. Casey had a little summer cold, and we stuck around. Oh, we did show him 2 beloved movies, Good Will Hunting.
Okay.
To which he said they swear so much.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's out of control. You don't notice it until someone points it out.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just like, yeah, that's how I grew up. I didn't grow up in Southie, but not too far from it, if you know what I'm talking about. And then we watched Jaws.
Oh, classic. 50th anniversary.
Yep. And we did it on July 4th, in honor of it being
Open
July
the beaches.
4th. Yeah.
Open those beaches, Chief.
I do have to ask, from my own trauma, your son doesn't have a beach vacation set up in the immediate future, does he?
Not that we know of.
Okay, because I think I mentioned in our last podcast about media that somehow I wound up. I think my parents maybe hand waved approval, but 2 days before we went to the beach for a week, I watched Jaws at 8 years old and did not go in the beach as much as they thought I would.
Yep.
So there we are.
Well, it was mission accomplished because he liked both films, and neither one I don't think would have broken us. I think we will talk someday about like the movie that if your kid doesn't like it, it just kills you. Neither one of those qualifies, but they were both successful.
I mean, but that is going to be a topic for today. We're talking about how we watch things with our kids, first at the very beginning and then moving on to those things.
I suggested it and then forgot all about it, Pete.
There we go.
We're doing great.
It's
We're
because as
doing
parents, we
absolutely
live in the
great so far.
moment. There's no long-term planning in parenthood. We live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Pete, right?
I will tell you, we've just in terms of our contemporary watches, I have watched my way through all of the Final Destination movies, and by extension, have roped my kids. They're ships in the night in our house right now. They come and go, but when they're here, I sit them down and we watch Final Destination movies together, and that has been a real treat, because if you haven't seen those movies, some of them are exceedingly dumb, but they will change the way you look at the world. Everything is a horrifying Rube Goldberg machine of death, and I actually find myself low-key loving it.
So in choosing to watch these with your kids,
Mm-hmm.
did you have a particular therapist who you wanted to help build a beach house for, or were you just failing wherever my kids' HMOs take them? That therapist, I will be throwing that money into the wind.
Insurance is very complicated
That's fair.
right now,
That's
Matthew.
fair.
I feel like we just have to go where the winds blow.
Just support the general industry. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Yeah, I watched 20 minutes of one of those, and no, never again. I'm very glad you can enjoy those, but they're not for me.
I wish I had a picture of my son watching some of these with me. It just the face just slack jawed amazement, shock, and then turns into such an expression of exuberant joy at the visceral violence, like the crushing. They turn people to marmalade in these movies, and he was having every bit of it. I couldn't have been more proud.
I don't think I've ever seen one. Final Destination. Those are horror movies.
Final
right?
Destination. There are 6 of them.
Oh,
well,
then how final could it have been?
It's not good. Not good from a marketing promise.
I think there is a movie called The End Part 2, but yeah,
right.
no, I just want to say, for any FBI agents who might be listening to these tapes years in the future for evidence against Pete or his son, everything Pete just said was for humor value. Nothing predictive there in the slightest. But no, I'm glad you enjoy all of that. And the topic of parenting and death is actually kind of fitting, because last night my spouse and I, my wife, my partner, my beloved, my friend, all of these things, Mary, took an infant CPR class. Now, was that a thing that you guys took when you were new to be parents?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was like you, but for me, I don't think I've had that many scare tactics thrown at me since I was in like 10th grade sex ed. Because the number of times that I heard the phrase, and then of course, if you do this, your child will die, was probably, if I'd been taking shots every time, I would not have lasted the first hour.
Mm-hmm.
Did they cover not putting socks on your child?
That was covered in
from my mom.
That was covered in 101, but parenting 101. But that was less for the danger. Well, the danger was that your kid would probably kick them off within 10 seconds.
Yes.
And then they would be in the crib, and then they might become a choking hazard down the future.
Sure.
But no,
strangle themselves with their little socks.
This was mostly on. I think the phrase "their ribs will heal, their heart will not" was mentioned at least 3 times.
Yeah.
We got to practice on those little babies that make this awful squeaking sound as you push into their chests. But it was really good information to know, and good grounding. And they did teach us about kids and about adults and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there going, this is helpful for my soon to be infant and my almost 85-year-old parents. So it's kind of helpful on both ends.
Yeah, that's a grim perspective on the world, that these tools are so useful for really great transitions.
Did it go beyond infancy, like to toddlers, or was it just?
Yeah, we definitely, like I said, he had mannequins for infants, which were the ones we practiced on, but then he also showed us on like a toddler-sized mannequin, a teenager-sized mannequin, and an adult.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the different levels and like when it was more of a pulmonary issue or a cardiac issue. And, one thing I learned is that the American Heart Association has videos about this. Like, it's better to do something in person, but you can also just watch a video, I think for free, on the American Heart Association's website. And so we've been sending that out to some of our potential grandparents and other people like that. And people who want to come over and spend a weekend with the kids and stuff like that. So yeah, just a good resource that's out there.
Now, when they talked about toddlers, and I'm not joking, did they talk about popcorn?
They didn't specifically mention popcorn, but the phrase he liked was that your child is a little raccoon. And if they can get their hands on it, it will go in their mouth. And if it can go in their mouth, it will go down their throat if they can.
Okay.
And so, yes, it was a Popcorn kernels may probably be a part of that conversation that I haven't heard yet.
Yes. And when my kids were 3.5, 4, my friend's little boy was eating popcorn. And a few days later, couldn't breathe, raced to the hospital, had massive surgery. They said a couple more hours he wouldn't have made it because there was a kernel like lodged in his lung or something. But he didn't know it. They didn't know it. You're not supposed to let your kids eat popcorn before age 5. Now, popcorn was served at my preschool. And Casey was like no, thank you. My mom says I'm not allowed to eat popcorn. But I was deadly serious about it. I mean, my friend called me from the hospital shaking and crying, saying we're going to lose the baby. He wasn't a baby. He was like 3.5 or 4.
Yeah.
So the more you know, public service announcement from Once and Future Parents, no popcorn till after age 5.
We have the
same story. I mean, we had somebody, a dear friend, young child who, 3 years old, aspirated on bacon, a piece of bacon. Same thing. It is, you like, speaking of Final Destination, you never know where the Rube Goldberg machine will start that will lead a popcorn kernel to
Rube
be in
Goldberg
your
sounds
babies.
like the name of my rabbi. I don't know what this is.
You don't know what a Rube Goldberg machine is?
No, and I don't like the way you said that, Pete.
Mandy, for crying F's sake, you don't know what the name of... No, it's one of those things, you've seen them. It's one of those things where one thing starts a ball rolling down, and it's an incredibly complex machine to do a stupidly simple task, right?
Okay.
Back to the Future, the opening credits of Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of
one. Okay, got it.
I think there's nothing wrong with not knowing one, but
Thank you, Matthew.
No, I think
it's a character. It's a way to judge someone's character, but that's okay. Whatever you guys think.
No, that's called being Yankees or Dodgers fans. But anyway, the point of all this being, actually, that's a beautiful transition, because what we're talking about today is watching things with our kids. Because last week we did a great episode on screen time and the dangers of it and all the ways to be careful about it. Pete, you missed a great episode, but we had a fantastic guest. Thank you to Mandy. And but obviously, sitting in front of a screen with your kid is sometimes a really fun thing to do. And all three of us enjoy the things that happen on screens and talking about them. We all know each other from various media-related podcasts. And, within reason, I think there's... we talked about how one of the important things is being able to monitor and kind of know what your kids are watching, but it's also just fun to introduce new people to new things and to recognize the value of the child watching a episode of something you find as painful as nails on a chalkboard for the 100th time that day, because that episode of Tommy the Tank Engine will make sure they don't go looking for popcorn kernels. So clearly, when we're taking our 4-year-olds to Disney movies, don't let them have popcorn, which good luck. But yeah, let's start talking about it. Let's start talking from the earliest age. When did you guys start intentionally letting your kids sit down and watch something, and what was it?
So it's so funny that there's this it caused me to go down this road of cultural carbon dating, to think about what were the things that I was watching when I was a kid, right? And because that definitely, influenced what I, as a new parent, I was willing to sit down and watch with my kids. And so for us, for me growing up, it was Sesame Street, it was Mr. Rogers, it was Electric Company, and it was probably around age 3. I think anything before then, if the TV was on, it was because I was in my parents' arms, right? I wasn't really watching. I was just being with them. But once, I hit kind of 3 to 8, it was that, Schoolhouse Rock. It was the Muppet Show, for crying out loud. It was all of those things. For my kids, it was the same channel, and yet we were watching things like Word World and, Dinosaur Train, I think, was on there. That's one. That is a theme song you'll never get out of your head. It's those kinds of things. It's the educational programming, and that, we had not really a rule, but a guideline that we weren't ever going to have the TV on just on. That if it was on, it was intentional, and we would sit through and suffer through any of these kids shows, with them, because we wanted to be present. And generally that was kind of a good barometer for how much TV we were watching. because when we would get bored, the TV would go off and we would go do another activity, right?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things. I mean, that was kind of the guideline. Before that, I mean, I would take days off of work as dad days. I'd put the Baby Bjorn on. The baby's in the Baby Bjorn sleeping, and I'm standing up rocking, and I'm playing video games. And that was an extraordinary time in my life. I will never forget it. So I don't know, 3 to 8. That's kind of where we were. I will step down off the box.
Mandy, what about yourself?
We talked about how when he was a baby, I would let him watch a baby Mozart when I needed to clean or shower or cook or do something.
Right.
But when it was conscious and he was into TV, PBS was incredible. I hope and pray it still exists for your child. Don't get me started. There were shows, I don't know if they're still on. Curious George, first and foremost. Clifford the Big Red Dog, with John Ritter doing the voice of Clifford. They
Classic.
were gentle shows with beautiful little stories about friendship and human emotion. They were really lovely shows on PBS.
Right.
And that just continues to, as your kids age. And then I think his first full-length movie was the Curious George movie, starring Will Ferrell as the man in the yellow hat.
Okay.
And it is, again, gentle and colorful, magical, wonderful. And you don't know until you're sitting with your 2.5, 3-year-old in your arms watching a movie. There are things that scare them that as a parent, you're thinking, what the heck is wrong with you? That's just a lady singing in her bathtub. But the lady singing in her bathtub would make Casey go nuts. Like he had to run out of the room. Her voice was operatic and loud. And it was like very, very scary to him. So even though we watched it many times, or the Huffalumps in the Winnie the Pooh movie, another beautiful movie, terror. And you just can't see it coming till it happens. And then it's like, oh, okay.
That's really funny. For me, the stories that I have, my first memories of seeing a full-length movie, Bambi, we had to leave the theater. But Star Wars, my uncle did not tell my parents and took me to Star Wars as like a 6-year-old, 5 or 6-year-old. And I loved it, everything about it. That was the first like real movie. It was stuff like the Rescuers. I loved Pete's Dragon. I loved, Superman, of course. It was formative for me in 78. So those kinds of movies, I was very eager to start introducing those kinds of things to my kid,
I'm sure.
My kids when we were young, and to some degree of success, middling to fair, I think, which is also full of great sadness.
And we'll definitely get to that. I just want to stay there just on the first introduction because it's funny. My parents, I think I mentioned that my mother was very much 1960s hippie. And I think she had that like a very good idea of wanting to avoid TV and commercialization. But I think she cast kind of too far a net because I was not allowed to watch Sesame Street, Electric Company, Mr. Rogers growing up because it was still TV. And she didn't want any of that. And of course, it's funny because you mentioned John Ritter. Instead, by the time I was 7 and I could figure out how to use the TV myself, I watched an awful lot of Three's Company. So I was like an 8, 10-year-old, which is not a show.
Lens, I loved Three's Company. And it didn't occur to my parents that it was inappropriate. It was hilarious and wacky physical comedy. And I watch it. If I see it today, it's like, the sexism, the
Barney Stinson would look like a feminist on that show. Like it was just, it was awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm really excited about this conversation. And I have to say, to me, like I thought seriously about having kids much earlier in my life. I was kind of, what I would call college engaged in that, we were two 20-year-old people in love and we were convinced we were going to get married after college, but no one bought a ring or anything like that. But we're starting to think about having kids in our early 20s. And I remember thinking way back then that one of the things that I would be most concerned about with kids watching things wasn't what they were watching, it was the commercials. And I think in many ways, and I think you guys were probably at the cusp of this, and I'd be curious to hear more about that. For me, while I want to be very aware of what my kids are watching and make sure like what kind of messages it does and doesn't have and stuff like that. The fact that I don't have to deal with them watching commercials every 8 to 10 minutes. Because I don't know if you've paid much attention to this stuff, but like I grew up watching a lot of the stuff that, I'm sure we all did, that had commercials all the time. And the messaging in those is so insidious and so awful. Like, I remember one year after my parents' divorce, my sister was watching a lot of shows like that. And it was getting close to Christmas time, Hanukkah time as well for our family. And I was paying attention to all these ads for like the gifts that people wanted their parents to give. And I remember noticing, this was like, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, every single time the kid got a like wonderful gift, they would run to one singular parent and say, "Oh my God, mommy, daddy, you're the best. Thank you for getting me this." And I was like, that's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought about how all of our friends would talk about, because we all had divorced parents, which one got us the better gifts, mommy or daddy. It was just like, oh my God. Like, of course, parents want to be the cool parent when you're divorced like that. Or just separated or whatever, or even when you're together and there's not a healthy relationship, and just, so that's just one example of where like, I think about the kind of ads that is on kids programming, and no matter what the programming itself is, I think that's what I'm most afraid of. And so glad that in the streaming world, at least that, I can put on Bluey and they're going to give 20 episodes of Bluey and not a single ad.
Casey used to watch, whatever it was, Paw Patrol, and he would come in and say, "Mom, Dad, I need a vacuum sealer in large, in large." And yeah, any one of those, call now, right?
Yeah.
They were still running those. And he would get mesmerized and want very adult things that are not fun. But he really thought, I need that. I need that.
Yeah.
Tell Santa.
It's funny. I mean, I know that those ads influenced, what I played with, what I ate. I mean, especially into my kind of younger teenage years, I was watching, talk about inappropriate, Dukes of Hazzard, right? I needed a General Lee. I needed an orange Dodge Charger with an overtly racist symbol painted on the top, presented so gloriously. I needed that in my life. I needed Knight Rider. I needed Airwolf. Jan Michael Vincent in his peak drug-addled, career days. It was Silver Spoons. Talk about exercises in privilege. What would I have given for a train going through my house? Like all of these messages were sort of Reagan's America commercialism. And I know I ate a lot of Kraft macaroni and cheese because of those ads. Like they made me hungry and we stocked it. It was suburban white bread Coke kind of country where I
whatever
grew
was
up
my favorite breakfast cereal would change every 2 weeks based on who had the coolest mascot and what was doing.
100%.
But I don't want to say that's all bad.
No.
Like, it's fun to dream of having a train in your house when you're young. That's just aspirational and fun. I don't want to knock all TV because they, they sold us products.
No, for sure not. But this is an era of like deep merchandising fantasy, right? The fact that I had He-Man action figures and Smurfs and Thundercats and Inspector Gadget and G.I. Joe and Transformers, like all of those were heavily merchandised shows, and they made my imagination what it is, right? The fact that when I turned the TV off, I still had a scene to play out in my bedroom. I had glorious battles. I
remember I was at some kind of nerd conference or something like that, like a Comic-Con or something like that. And I passed this table where he was selling these old like Star Wars toys. And I just got talking to the guy. I was like, oh yeah, I remember I had a, Millennium Falcon when I was like 6 years old. That was my favorite toy. I played with it for hours on end. And I was like, oh, do you still have it? You can probably sell it for a lot. And I was like, I was crashing it into walls and the floor and like throwing things at it and like throwing it at things. Like it was not mint condition. I played with that thing.
Seeing if it could fly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what my girlfriends and I did when we were 8 or 9, and Ricky Schroeder, whose name should not be uttered ever again, was on Silver Spoons. We would play Silver Spoons Girlfriends, which meant whatever house we were at, we would go in the bedroom and get dressed for dates with our boyfriends. Here is a dark look at who I was back then. Thank God this did not manifest through my adult life. People would, I get to be Ricky's girlfriend this time. He had a best friend named JT who was a cowboy. He had Alfonso Ribeiro.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be Derek's girlfriend, the jerk played by Jason Bateman. And everyone knew I was Derek's girlfriend. No one else wanted it, and I wanted it.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Well,
Sexy
Jason
bad
Bateman.
boy?
Jason, yeah. I mean, Jason Bateman was funny and quick-witted and edgy and dark, and I was into it. What does that say about me?
Fantastic.
Can we change the theme of the show to what's wrong with Mandy and her taste in juvenile bad boys?
I'm going to affirm it a little bit, because I'm going to say one of my favorite of the new kind of Disney Pixar movies in the last couple of years, when they decided that the villain is always going to be generational trauma, is Turning Red. And one of my favorite parts of that movie is, as I understand it now, what happens most of the time is not with a TV show, it's with a boy band. You know, and like whether it was One Direction a little while ago, or now it's a K-pop band, you'll still have groups of teenage girls, or often adult girls, or people of all genders, saying, okay, well, you get to date this one, and I get to date this one.
Yes.
And I remember people talking about how cringe it was, but it was like I loved it. It was this great exploration of like, this is what middle school girls are like, and boys, and people of all genders can be, who are into masculine looking people. And it was just, yeah. And I do think that's one of the things I'm most excited about is I'm going to want to use media to teach my kids. And I'm going to really excited for them to watch Star Wars. And if they don't like it, they'll be out on the street. We'll talk about that later. And don't call CPS. I'm kidding, probably. But I also expect that their media is also going to teach me, you know, because I remember, well, here's where I'm hoping I'm going to be better. Because one of my biggest frustrations as a kid was that I would watch something that I thought was so deep and had things I wanted to talk about, and I would try to get my parents to watch it with me. And my mother sometimes would, but my dad never would. And so now I'm like, if there's something my 10-year-old and their friends are talking about, I'm going to want to watch it and talk to them about it. Realistically, probably 10 minutes in, I'm going to be like, oh God, why did I ever say that? And why did I ever broadcast it to the, I want to say millions, but probably dozens of listeners?
We're sending this episode to your child.
In 10 years. And I'll be like, all right, I've got to sit through this episode. Oh, wow. Look. This person is being like, you know, not great to their friend. Bullying is bad. What an insightful television show. But I'm open to that, because like, I do think, you know, each generation is getting new content that is just so different than we got before.
And I think it's important to stretch the kinds of things that the kids are watching in a way that allows them to discover their own taste and sensibilities, right? Like I'll never forget sitting down with my parents and watching, you know, the early seasons of Cheers. Before I would understand what any of the jokes were, I just knew it was smart and funny because people I loved and respected thought it was smart and funny, and they were laughing, and I liked watching them laugh. That was so eye-opening. It got me into so many shows that I never would have found on my own. Saint Elsewhere, right? Like, I mean, shows that my parents loved that I was probably too young to watch and understand, definitely too young to understand. But that when I finally, as I was maturing and I started understanding the jokes, I realized, oh, I know what's funny broadly, and I know what's not, and that defines taste, right? That defines the things that I'm going to seek out on my own. It allows, like, that era in the sort of late 80s was extraordinarily, I would say all of the 80s, obviously extraordinarily formative, right? Because we have E.T., we have Kids with Agency, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. Holy cow, that was the adventure that defined, you know, what I think of as adventure movies for the rest of my life. Goonies, Kids with Agency. I know so many of my friends whose parents would not let them watch Goonies, when Goonies showed me that kids could be empowered, that kids had a voice in the midst of louder voices of adults. Gremlins, Ghostbusters, right? Back to the Future. A kid can be a hero in Back to the Future, right? Those are
E.T., the kids who weren't listened to by government but could still do cool things.
Right. And that really, I mean, it pivots in the later 80s where you get Ferris Bueller, where you have a kid with agency who takes it very, very far for comedy. But
he's
still
helping his friends.
Teaches you, like, that gives you, I think those are empowering messages. And I think we get that from our movies, and introducing our kids to them it's not a message of like overt consumerism. It's not, maybe the kids swear once in a while. The truth is the message of that the kids have lives that they get to direct is way more important than the things we're trying to protect them from.
Yeah. And go ahead, Manny.
Well, it's interesting because John Hughes is extraordinarily problematic now.
I know.
And we did watch Breakfast Club with Casey, and he liked it, and we explained some of the just awful themes and what was acceptable back then and how it's not. But I had friends who were like, we watched 16 Candles with our 12-year-old girls. We forgot. Like we were unaware when we were teenagers watching John Hughes movies. But good Lord, they're very rapey, and I dare say you can't even really do it because it's hard to parse out. Like, ignore this part. Oh, never say anything like that. Oh, stop the movie. Let's have a big talk about racism right now. You just can't even enjoy a John Hughes movie anymore, I think.
Molly Ringwald, who was the star of so many of them, she wrote a really powerful piece about how she looks back on it and is deeply ashamed. She's both ashamed but also angry because she got pressured into, as a teenage actress, acting out a lot of these scenes that she felt were really, just wrong on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, a lot of, when I think about how to be a good friend to a person who you might be interested in but isn't interested in you, Ducky. Like, that's...
Absolutely.
But then I would watch Justice for Ducky campaigns, and I'd be like, well, but also, was he kind of stalkery? Like, I don't want to go back and watch that movie because it may be that I watch it and I'm like, oh no, actually he's terrible. Like, I just don't know,
I think Ducky ends up okay. I think Ducky's still okay. From what I remember.
I hope so.
But it's the same thing you get with like Some Kind of Wonderful, and some of these. I recognize that John Hughes is problematic, but John Hughes is problematic through the eyes of history. And some of the better John Hughes movies, we, as long as we're aware of what is going on, the kids get to make their decisions. The movies aren't going anywhere, and I think it's okay. I'm not saying, like, I really think that we need to showcase more characters like Long Duck Dong, because casual Chinese racism is really important in our cinematic vernacular. Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. He was never played for representation. He was played for jokes. Like, I totally get it. But I also think it's okay to have those conversations.
That's the most egregious one, is 16 Candles.
Yeah,
I think the others are, there's more merit, more heart.
And if you think that, like, it's 80s movies that are a problem, you can always go back in time and watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, for example.
Right.
Which probably has the even more offensive representation of
exactly
characters.
Right. And so we get, like, the other thing that we get is, like, just rampant homophobia, right? But it's homophobia by today's standards. And so I may not choose as a 12-year-old to say, hey, let's sit down and watch Weird Science, right? Like, no. But as a 16-year-old...
I love that movie as a 12-year-old, but for all the wrong reasons.
You know what I mean? Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I think there are stages, and I think that it's important to at least recognize that it's this kind of troublesome media. In 50 years, we're going to have problems with today's, and that's okay, because we change.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies of all time was Ghostbusters, and I've talked about watching it later as an adult and being like, wow, this is problematic. But I still think that, my 8-year-old kid or whatever age will probably find the antics of the ghosts as hilarious as I did. And the huge Marshmallow Man. I just might talk to them about, okay, did it seem like Sigourney Weaver's character wanted Bill Murray's character to be that forward with her? How do we feel about that? Do we think that maybe government officials telling unbridled people who just wanted, like, I rewatched the movie and I realized that the government official trying to shut them down should be the hero of that movie. Like, it's one of the most anti-government, like 80s libertarian, let us do whatever the hell we want, damn the consequences, damn the nerds and the geeks. And I'm just like, no, he's the hero. They should be regulated. I want to flip it aside though, and also say that I think I'm looking forward to the balance, because there's a lot of stuff from our time that I think is problematic. I think that even if I watch Mr. Rogers, there may be some things that I kind of cringe at, but a lot of it's probably going to be really, really good and hold up. But I've been watching some of the stuff that is newer today. I know your kids are way too old to appreciate this, but have you guys ever caught an episode of Bluey?
I know
Never
it's a
once.
phenomenon.
Yeah, it's huge.
The way it was first pitched to me, I figured it was like Barney 201, and my teenage friends and I doused a Barney doll in gasoline and lit it on fire as a ritual to celebrate the end of high school. We did not like Barney. We were weird kids. I know that for funny value, and Mandy wants to call a psychiatrist. But like, we were troubled kids. But and that's how I started so Bluey. But I've watched a couple episodes of it now. It is so good at like both getting parents and kids to talk about, these early kind of conversations. There's one episode where, the father is just a very exuberant, gruff kind of loving dad. And two of his kids love that he kind of like picks them up and bear hugs and swirls them around. And the other, I saw it about a year ago, so I don't remember the details, but I think the other one like gets a little nauseous when it happens. But like, he's worried about telling his father that. Mm-hmm. And he talks to his mom, and his mom helps him figure it out. And it winds up being a great episode that teaches 3-year-olds it's okay to tell adults that you don't like the way they touch you, even when they mean it in a nice way. I was like, well, that's an incredible message to tell kids. And that, and that like, it's couched in those language, but like, you want to make sure a kid has healthy boundaries when it comes to dating in 15 years. That's a good start.
That's a good start.
Really, really good start.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the fact that it is, it's today's messaging that is going to deal with today's, the issues that kids are facing today. I would not say that watching Mr. Rogers from 40 years ago is going to teach about the importance of consent. I don't, that's not a thing that we thought about as,
because washing feet with a black police officer, because racism isn't a thing anymore. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but also a lot of those issues are still very, very relevant.
They're very, very relevant. But I'm saying, like, as the kids get older, teens, you start seeing, more and more messaging, kid-appropriate messaging for like, here are the horrible things that can happen in school. Here's what let's talk about what a lockdown is. Those were things we did not talk about, right? We did not talk about, in kids' messaging back then. And I think it's just important to recognize the complexity of the stories that kids have to sort of internalize today, that we have the gift of, 30, 40, 50 years of adaptation, and they need to get it a little bit faster.
In a weird way with the lockdown, I want to get to the other half of our topic in a minute, but because what you said sparked something here. In a weird way, the lockdown stuff is something I feel, I don't know if you guys feel like this, but our parents are even more equipped, are maybe more equipped to talk to our kids about, because I think this is probably true of all of us. None of us did like nuclear air raid drills as kids, right?
Closest I had was weather, tornadoes. I started in Tornado Alley, so we did a lot of running from weather.
But like when I talk to my dad or people of his generation, my aunts and uncles and all them, they all talk about that kind of thing. And I've heard them talk about like their grandkids going through shooting drills and it feeling very familiar. And I think it's interesting. We're the generation that kind of skipped that, but it's happened before.
Yeah,
for sure.
So on that deep, dark topic that I take us to, let's get to a little lighter. Obviously, we want to show our kids things that educate them, that help inform them, but also there's stuff that we love to watch because it's fun to watch, and we want to share that with people. And there's a lot of stuff out there about sharing it with your romantic partner, your friends. What happens, though, when your kids don't think that the thing you loved the most in the world is as... What happens when your kids are wrong? I'm not going to say your opinions, but what do you do when your kids are wrong about the great media that you loved?
We have a tradition I love in our house on Mother's Day. Jeremy cooks, and I get to choose whatever movie we're going to watch as a family after dinner. And years ago, I chose my favorite movie musical, Meet Me in St. Louis, which Casey was maybe 7. So, old enough to follow the story. I love this movie deeply. He was so bored. And then Jer jumped on that and they made fun of it as we were watching it. And I was hurt like I had made the movie myself. I was so hurt, and I couldn't believe that my son didn't appreciate, Judy Garland running around a small town in the 19 teens. Like, of course he didn't. It's not for him.
Yeah.
But or The Court Jester was a childhood one for
Danny
me,
Kaye,
Danny
yeah.
Kaye. And I showed it to him when he was probably too young, 4 or 5. And to him, that's boring. The things he was watching were so much faster paced and loud and exciting. So the minute 2 grownups were on screen talking, he was out.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent many, many years like that with him trying movies and sorry, Mom, I don't like it. I don't like it. It's hard. You thought that would be one way and it turned out an entirely different way. But now he loves musicals and he'll watch pretty much any one of them with me. And he came back around.
I think that's the big lesson that we learned, which was after a number of trials to introduce them to something we cared very deeply about and having it fail and being hurt, just like Mandy described it, we had to let go and we had to just be very subversive about it and stop showing our appreciation for the movies and TV that we were watching. We had to just say, oh, look, this is on, and sit down and watch it. And the
like
more...
what?
It could be anything. It could be a Star Trek movie or a Star Wars movie or something that, because the Star Wars did not go well because it looks old compared to what we were watching. It took years for them to come back around to episode 4. As soon as I would stop trying to advocate for the existence of something and that they should like it, when they got to make their own decision, they generally came back around my way, right? Because there is a very long stage in parenting where kids are contradictory just because you said it. And if I say...
I wasn't, Pete. What are you talking about?
There we go. If I say, look, I need you to sit down and watch Stand By Me, objectively great movie, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I need you to sit down and watch with it, I would get nothing but a kid staring at his phone or at something else or crossed arms and not loving it. And I would say, what'd you think of it at the end? If they stayed that long, and I would get, it was fine. It was okay. But if I shut up, if I don't say a word, they get to discover what they like about it and not have to do it with any sort of, they're not justifying it to me. They're not rationalizing their opinions to me. It's their own. It's their identity. And I think that was a really important lesson for me, is to just take a step back. It allows me to just love the stuff I love. And if they find their way to it, then we'll have something in common.
Or they'll see it at a friend's house and love it when they
Huge.
wouldn't, right?
Yes.
He has discovered so much cool stuff. And I'm like, where did you said you didn't want to watch that. I know, but I was at Spencer's and Spencer wanted to watch it. So I did, and I loved it.
So the worst one, Mandy, do you get this? Keenan's dad said this was good, so I watched it and loved it. Oh no. Man. When another parent recommends something that you love,
not be okay with that.
You just have to hold your tongue. You just hold your tongue and let them love it, because it's good to love something together. But if you try to bring them, can't make them drink.
Hold your tongue, let them love it, key the other adult's car. But totally get it.
Yes, all three of those.
There's a couple things I'd say there. One is just, I've thought about this a lot with Star Wars, especially because one thing I think is that just kids are always going to like different things, but also there are aspects of movie making and of TV making that are so fundamentally different. And one of the biggest ones, and Pete, you're more the movie guy than I am, but one of the biggest ones of those is pacing. And by today's standards, like to me, Star Wars is an action-packed movie where things are happening all the time. But today's standards, it is a plodding, drawn-out movie.
A lot of time on a moisture farm.
You know, and I love it. But even I had to like, there was one time where I'd kind of watched like a whole bunch. I think I'd watched like 5 Fast and the Furious movies in a weekend because a new one was coming out.
Mm-hmm. And
then just 2 days later, I watched A New Hope, and I was like, no, I don't think this is slow. This movie is perfectly paced. It's perfectly paced. It's let me check my phone. You know, it just, the flip side though, on what you're saying about letting them love it, I don't know if you guys went through this, but in my group of friends in like the early 90s, this is pre-Nirvana and stuff like that. If you were like one of the, what you now call alternative kids, we didn't really have a name for it, but like you didn't like the pop music that all your friends, that all the other cool kids at school liked. And where a lot of us went was older music. And like a lot of us became Grateful Dead fans. A lot of us also became like punks and goths and that kind of thing. And I drifted there. But starting out, like I was wearing like homemade clothes and like, you know, smelling like patchouli because I was a big Grateful Dead fan. And that led me to a lot of other great music of that era, including Creedence Clearwater. And I thought Creedence Clearwater was like the baddest shit in the world. You know, Fortunate Son, this incredible protest song. And I'm playing it one time and my dad comes home and is like, oh yeah, I love this music. I listened to this when I was your age. And I turned it off so fast because it stopped being cool. It was my dad's music. Mm-hmm. And then maybe like 3 months later, I bought a CD and started listening to it when my dad wasn't there. And I would make sure, and finally he caught me. And I was like, it's okay to like this music. I was like, fine, Dad. But yeah, I didn't want to like it because he liked it.
Right.
Yeah. But the beauty of that is once you sort of let go, like I'm starting a new podcast with my son. And we're talking about all of the best picture winners throughout history. And we sat down and I thought this is going to be just a lead balloon right here. We're going to start with 1927's Wings, a silent film that's almost 3 hours long. And I didn't say anything. I didn't even tell him that was what was going on. That was what we were about to watch. And he was riveted. He was riveted because I didn't have to say anything. The movie sold itself. It's like Top Gun from 1927. It's extraordinary. And the fact that it was different and wasn't modern, he just had found a way to attach to it on his own. He didn't need an advocate for it. He's learned how to discover new things and like them himself. And I think that's, you know, I can't ask for anything more than that. And so much of it comes from letting go of the need to have him have my taste.
Okay, your kid is better than mine.
Well, Mandy, I'm glad you said that because I was going to say Pete is clearly at a better journey with his ADHD than I am because I heard the words 3 hours of staring at a screen with no audio input, just having to be visual, and just had a heart attack. Like,
you got to watch this movie. I'm telling you, it is stimulating.
I need to get back into that. We'll save that for your ADHD podcast. But yeah, that's a hard thing. But yeah, and I do also wonder. One of the things that I'm thinking of is also that like I need to remember to get my validation about the things I love from other places, not my kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of curious for you all, maybe especially for Pete, but for either of you, have there ever been times where like, you know, Mandy, your kid didn't like Meet Me in St. Louis, so you made sure to do a song from it in the cabaret next time just to make sure you knew people loved it. Or Pete, you decided like, my kids didn't like this movie. I have to like turn to the next real fandom and like make sure they don't think I'm nuts for liking this movie. Like, has this ever been your support group for your kids don't love it, but you're okay for loving it too?
Oh my God. That's like why I get up in the morning is to just talk about the stuff that I want to amplify because no one in my house gives a shit. Like,
that's fair.
I just saw you 3 weeks ago, right? In Minneapolis. I went alone to tour Paisley Park because that was my fandom and nobody else cares. Right? Nobody else cares.
I would have gone with you if I'd known you were going alone. I figured it was you and your wife were going.
Oh, no. She was doing reunion stuff. I went on this tour by myself, and it was extraordinary. The ability for me to, like, it all starts with, like, being able to go out and eat dinner by yourself, being able to go out to a movie by yourself, being able to, like, the more I can figure out how to satisfy my own needs, the less I feel like I need to watch my kids be enthusiastic about the same stuff to give me gratification. And that was a long, hard-won lesson. that I'm not going to be able to do that with it. They're going to have their own opinions, and that sucks. I just want them all to have mine.
Yeah.
But
I'm the
that's
opposite,
reality.
and I'm like, well, my kid's stupid. Whatever. He doesn't get it. I'm right. This is a classic. There's a reason.
I can get behind that. I'm certainly we joke around on my Generations pod. So I'm going through a version of this on my Star Wars Generations podcast, which is, they're not my kids, they're friends of mine, but they're significantly younger. I'm Gen X, one of them is a millennial, and one of them is a Zoomer. And it's been really interesting realizing that like you take something like Star Wars, which is a franchise that existed over 50 years, and now it's not just about like what style of movie making, but it's realizing that they entered the conversation at a later point. You know, I had the original movies for decades. And so when these movies about Anakin came along, I had 20 years of knowing Darth Vader. And so everything was like, well, is Anakin Vader? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up with the movies about Anakin, or with the TV shows about Anakin, the Clone Wars and all that. And so their relation to it is just fundamentally different. And, you know, I don't know if any of you are the right generation, but I'm curious. I would love to have a conversation. If you guys know someone who this sort of fits the bill of, because I've seen online people talk about how like they grew up with their favorite Disney movie, and now their kid won't watch the original, but will watch the remake. And like these conversations about like the remakes can be, I think the remakes are soulless garbage, but like if you can't get your kid to watch the original Aladdin, but you can get them to watch the one with Will Smith, maybe that's better. I love Will Smith, don't get me wrong, but Robin Williams in that movie, I think, is just one of the most comedic gold perfect moments of any movie. And the idea that you need to have it through a faster paced, more lights and action version with Will Smith breaks my heart, but maybe that's just what works.
Well,
you know?
like I said, you didn't create the movies, so we need to take it less personally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's going to like what they like.
The context is so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have so many memories of watching Aladdin in the theater and having an experience because I went with a bunch of other people who loved musical theater and loved musical movies, and that colored my impression of my experience with that movie and my sense memory of it. And every time I watch it, I'm watching not just the movie, I'm watching my first time with the movie. And my kids don't get that experience. They get that experience with something else. And so I have to kind of back off of that and just try to give them memories of new stuff that we can like together going forward, because they're not going to like everything that I like from my childhood. They have no context for it.
Yeah. The dinosaurs in Jurassic Park when we were teenagers were amazing. We'd never seen anything like that on screen before.
Okay, they're still dope. They're still dope.
I still love them, but like I talk to people who've grown up watching a million times cooler effects on screen all the time. They're like, oh, whatever, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When they don't know that Jurassic Park was first, like first to do so many of these photorealistic creatures in CG and make them look real in rain and scare the pants off you, it just looks like another thing they've seen a million times. And that's hard. It's hard to stomach. It's hard for me to stomach that. But boy, it gets me back to that moment I saw it live in the theater the first time.
I was babysitting a kid many years ago. I think he was like 11 or 12. I was in college. I was like a kid of one of my friends and or coworkers. And he was really interested in like World War II movies and stuff like that. And so I said, well, and he was also like kind of like, you know, we were talking about, you know, like dating and stuff like that. He was starting to like, take an interest in girls. I was like, okay, the most romantic movie you're ever going to see, and it's a World War II movie. Let's watch Casablanca together. And he said, all these lines are so tropey.
They weren't then.
He invented the tropes. I know. I wanted to rip my hair out.
They made tropes.
Right.
But yeah, he just rolled his eyes. He was like, oh, the two guys walking to the sunset. I've seen that 1,000 times before. I was like,
you've seen those 1,000 times after. Say it right.
Troglodytes. Anyway. Mandy's right. Kids are wrong. We'll suffer through it together, and I will use you as my support group.
All right.
This has been another episode of Once and Future Parents.
Thank you all
Don't
so
let
much
your
for
kids
listening.
eat popcorn. Mandy's all right.
Mandy's always right.
Mandy's right. The original Star Wars is the best.
We don't